बोध वन्दे ब्रह्मनाद ब्रह्मनाद वन्दे बोध वन्दे ब्रह्मनाद वन्दे बोध वन्दे ब्रह्मनाद वन्दे बोध वन्दे ब्रह्मनाद वन्दे साधन ಮಾಡುವ ಹಾದಿ ಒಂದೇ ಆದಿ ಪದವು ಒಂದೇ ಬೋಧ ಒಂದೇ ಬ್ರಹ್ಮನಾದ ಒಂದೇ ಬೋಧ ಒಂದೇ बोध वन्दे ब्रह्मनाद वन्दे साधन ಮಾಡುವ ಹಾದಿ ಒಂದೇ ಆದಿ ಪದವು ಒಂದೇ ಬೋಧ ಒಂದೇ ಬ್ರಹ್ಮನಾದ ವಂದೇ ಬೋಧ ವಂದೇ ಬ್ರಹ್ಮನಾದ ವಂದೇ ಬಿಂದು ವಂದೇ ಬಿಂದು ವಂದೇ ಮಹಾನಂದ ವಂದೇ ಬಿಂದು ವಂದೇ ಮಹಾನಂದ ವಂದೇ ತಂದೆ ಸದ್ಗುರು ಗೋವಿಂದಗ ವಂದೇ ತಂದೆ ಸದ್ಗುರು ಗೋವಿಂದಗ ವಂದೇ ಅಂದಿಗೆ ಇಂದಿಗೆ ವಂದೇ ಬೋಧ ವಂದೇ ಬೋಧ ವಂದೇ ಬ್ರಹ್ಮನಾದ ವಂದೇ ಬೋಧ ವಂದೇ ಬ್ರಹ್ಮನಾದ ವಂದೇ ಸಾಧನ ಮಾಡುವ ಹಾದಿ ಒಂದೇ ಆದಿ ಪದವು ಒಂದೇ ಬೋಧ ವಂದೇ ಬ್ರಹ್ಮನಾದ ವಂದೇ ಬೋಧ ವಂದೇ ಬೋಧ ವಂದೇ ಬ್ರಹ್ಮನಾದ ವಂದೇ ದೋಷ ವಂದೇ ದೋಷ ವಂದೇ ನಿರ್ದೋಷ ವಂದೇ ದೋಷ ವಂದೇ ನಿರ್ದೋಷ ವಂದೇ ದೋಷ ವಂದೇ ನಿರ್ದೋಷ ವಂದೇ ಶಿಶುನಾಳಧೀಶನ 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 ಭಾಷೆ ಒಂದೇ ಶಿಶುನಾಳಧೀಶನ ಭಾಷೆ ಒಂದೇ ಭವನಾಶ ಒಂದೇ ಬೋಧ ವಂದೇ बोध वन्दे बोध वन्दे ಬ್ರಹ್ಮನಾದ ವಂದೇ ಸಾಧನ ಮಾಡುವ ಹಾದಿ ಒಂದೇ ಆದಿ ಪದವು ಒಂದೇ ಬೋಧ ಒಂದೇ ಬೋಧ ಒಂದೇ ಬೋಧ ಒಂದೇ ಬ್ರಹ್ಮನಾದ ವಂದೇ ಬೋಧ ವಂದೇ ಬ್ರಹ್ಮನಾದ ವಂದೇ ಬ್ರಹ್ಮನಾದ ವಂದೇ ಬ್ರಹ್ಮನಾದ ವಂದೇ.
And has continued his practice of yoga ever since. He then earned a master's degree in physical education at Banaras Hindu University, Varanasi in 2009. He has published many papers on Surya Namaskara and regularly lectures on yoga, health, and nutrition.
Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to welcome you here and present my book. In truth, it took me about 30 years to write this book, because this is a book you can see outside. It was just practiced first. I practiced the techniques, and based on my experience, the book has been written. I have also worked here in the Bay Area with global companies involved in the computer industry. And before I moved into the field more professionally, now I am working on PhD, and hopefully I will complete PhD this year. The subject, of course, is on dynamic Surya Namaskar, very thorough research. But over the years of observation, what I wanted to share with you, and being very much aware how little time people have in nowadays life, it is just rushing. You know, everybody's looking for a proverbial capsule of, you know, medicine or anything as short as possible. It has to be effective. Number one, effective and short, otherwise nobody will use it. So here you have it, a capsule of superb health system exercise from immemorial times. You know, Vedic times, or some authors list 3,000 years, some they say it's much, much longer time back into the past. Here you have this wonderful system of Surya Namaskar. There are many, many different forms. I focus on one form, and one form, any form actually that you pick, they list about 50 forms in different parts of India. But the one I focused in is from Shivananda Ashram or Satyananda Ashram, Bihar School of Yoga. It's so-called Rishikesh series. It's quite popular, you will see that. But the way how to do it, it's very different. That's the reason I call it dynamic Surya Namaskar. Those Surya Namaskar, you might say, it is a dynamic yoga anyway, because normally in asanas we observe stability, steadiness. There is no any movement, any motion. Here you have motion. This is more like a VYASA flow, but in a dynamic form of Surya Namaskar is very intense and very strenuous. Enough to say, if you would come to the high level of performance here, it would, in half an hour daily, as I practice, if I have half an hour, I lose about 2 pounds body weight in sweat left. It is very dynamic. Someone would say, hold on, this is not yoga, this is some kind of aerobics. In fact, there is an aspect which is aerobic, no doubt. But I also looked at the benefits which are described in Hatha Pradipika, Granda Sanhita, all these yogic scriptures. And as I compared the benefits that I'm getting in my own practice and whatever the sages of the past described, is just like one for one. So I encourage everyone to try it. You can start slowly. You can start with 5, 10, 20 rounds, and then you will realize that you have capacity to go 100, 200, even 1,000. So depending how much time, by the time normally when you would use maybe 15 minutes commuting to your gym, here you will be able to do with this speed about 120 Surya Namaskar, and that alone, if you can do that every day, will keep you in top shape. And my research really confirm all these observations. So I encourage, again, if you want to take a risk, get the book. It is all practical. It has been envisioned as a practical manual. There is something for everyone. It is for people like scientists, if you want a review or of all the research done on Surya Namaskar, whatever I could find it is in there, but it's also for practitioners. It's also spiced with some experiences. There are some yogis, as far as I know, who don't do anything else in India, just practice Surya Namaskar. And that's their whole sadhana, their whole practice. There are mantras also listed there, all kinds of mantras which are repeated and done together with the flow of the asanas. Thank you very much.
Nagendra to formally release the book, Dynamic Surya Namaskar.
Paper on yoga for hypertension and heart disease. I ended up seeing 3 people with their cardiac, all the reports and angiogram. Took care of 2 patients with cardiac problem. I was bombarded with email last night. So everybody's asking for information. This is a DVD called Taksha Yoga Therapy for Health and Healing by me, Dilip Sarkar. It's a 3-part DVD. It has, one has an introduction, and that has a asanas, another is a pranayam and a mudras, and it has all the information, how to start a yoga therapy program for a people who have a disease. Then it has all the asanas, pranayam, mudras are exactly in chaptered, so you have to just click one and you will get the health benefits. So instead of sending me emails and calling me, please, these are available outside, you can buy one. Thank you again.
Of the International Association of Yoga Therapists, IAYT. He is a practicing yoga teacher and a therapist with a professional background in economics, finance, and nonprofit management. John holds teacher and therapist certifications for the American Vinyasa Institute and a teaching certificate from A.G. Mohan in Chennai, India. His work for IAYT and his writings often have an economic and public policy perspective. John was a founding board member of the renewed IAYT in 2004.
Well, thank you so much. I want to tell you, first of all, I want to give a thanks to the organizers of this conference. I have really enjoyed being here and meeting so many wonderful, fascinating people here. So thank you so much for this. And thank you for giving me just a few moments to talk about IYT. IYT is a professional association. We have about 3,000 members, about 90 schools, and we have members in about 50 countries. And I feel a lot of affinity to Yoga Bharati as a sister organization. So I feel very good to be here about that. Okay, so IYT is a simple organization. We only do 4 things. First of all, as I said, we're a membership organization. We're very ecumenical. We're very representative of the major yoga lineages, mostly in the West. We have a fair amount of Indian members, but it's most of our membership is in North America. So again, 3,000 members, 50 countries, and about 90 schools, 90 member schools who give certifications in yoga therapy. The first thing we've done for many years is professional publications. We've published the International Journal of Yoga Therapy for about 22 years. I have a little correction to my friend from VYASA. The Journal of Yoga may be the first yoga journal accepted by PubMed, but it's not the only journal accepted by PubMed. Okay. And so I want to first of all introduce our editor, Grace Bullock. Grace, would you stand up? She's the editor of the International Journal of Yoga Therapy. And if you would like to submit some articles, talk to her. Okay. So we have 2 journals, or 2 publications. One is the journal. Again, we publish journals from people, articles from people all over the world. The journal is a scholarly journal. We have another magazine, I say, for the rest of us, called Yoga Therapy Today. I'll just show you one example. This is for practicing yoga therapists. I'll have some examples up here. The other thing we do are conferences. We have 2 conferences. We have one conference called the Symposium on Yoga Therapy and Research. It's a conference for practitioners, people actually practicing yoga research, and medical professionals that use yoga research in their practice. We've had 4. The first one was in Los Angeles. I remember starting our first conference. You know what it's like to start a first conference? You don't know how many people are going to come. We hope to have 400, and we had 800 people come to our first conference. It shows how much interest there is in yoga as therapy. Then, a couple of years ago, we started another conference. We started an academic yoga research conference. Now, how many people would come to an academic conference on yoga? High quality academic research. We thought maybe 50. We had 200 people come to the first Symposium on Yoga Research. So, Satbir, would you stand up? Okay, Satbir Khalsa has been the chair and the visionary behind our research conference. And our next one is in Boston in June of 2013, both the Scientific Research Conference and our Symposium for Practitioners. Now, IYT's mission is to establish yoga as a recognized and respected therapy. To establish yoga as a respected and recognized therapy. That's like a sutra, because there's lots behind that. So to establish this mission, we have reluctantly got into the standards business. So we have worked hard to develop standards for the training of yoga therapists. We've announced these or put on our website, and that's been supported by these 90 schools all across North America and across the world that have been supporting the development of what I'm going to call professional level standards for yoga therapists, about the level of a professional master's degree in the United States. And we're doing this in conjunction or in cooperation with our sister organization called the National Ayurvedic Medical Association. So in the West, both yoga and Ayurveda are beginning to recognize more and more. Yoga and Ayurveda come from a much different system, but in the West we have to have standards. So these two organizations are working together to have high-quality professional standards for the training of yoga therapists. So if you're interested in that, see me or see one of the IT members, IYT board members here afterwards, and we can discuss that. Okay, now I'd just like to introduce a few more of the IYT folks here because we have several board members here. So Eleanor Griswold, would you stand up? She's our president. She has a quite distinguished history for teaching yoga in the United States. She taught a graduate course on yoga and psychology for 40 years at Sonoma State. Okay, what a pioneer of yoga in America here. So I'm so happy. Maturaj, would you stand up? Another one of our board members. Okay. BK Bose, is he here this morning? He was on the panel on Yoga for Transformation. He's the person behind Niroga Institute. Okay. And Dilip Sakar, Dr. Sakar, another one of our board members here. Okay. So that's just a snapshot of IYT. I want to again thank the organizers for giving me just a few moments to talk about that.
In India. Dr. Shirley Tellis is a neuroscientist involved in yoga research. With an MPhil and a doctorate in neuroscience in 1992, she has over 25 years of experience in yoga research. Currently, she's the director of research at Patanjali Yogapeeth, Haridwar, and advisor to Swami Vivekananda Yoga Research Foundation in Bengaluru. In addition, she heads the Center for Advanced Research in Yoga and Neurophysiology by the Indian Council of Medical Research, Government of India. Dr. Tellis is herself an ardent yoga practitioner and believes that yoga practice and research go hand in hand. So please help me welcome to the stage Dr. Shirley Tellis.
Shows that people of all shapes and sizes can practice yoga. Good morning. It's a pleasure, real pleasure to be here and to see the wonderful cooperation and interaction between the volunteers. I thank the organizers for the opportunity to see people working in such synchrony and harmony. In the next few minutes, I'm going to take you on a tour across yoga research in India. This is going to be a geographical tour because we're going to go to North India, come to the south and go back again, as well as a tour in time because we're going to go back thousands of years and then come back to 2012. Why are we going back thousands of years? Yoga is an ancient science, so it's only fitting that the research really began thousands of years ago with the rishis of India. So the rishis of India used their own experiences, and their laboratory was just their body and their mind. And fortunately for posterity, they've actually passed on their experiences either through word of mouth or through writing, and we have them with us today. Well, experience is not enough. We also need experiments. And this wonderful blend of experience and experiments, of science and spirituality, was seen in one great sage, Swami Kuvalayanada, seen to the left of the slide. Way back in the 1920s, he did very meticulous experiments on the physiological effects of yoga practices. You can see a smoked drum, a kymograph here, where he's actually recording pranayama practices. And he even did some x-rays during Udyan Bandha and a whole set of meticulous experiments which he documented in the first yoga research journal. And here I'm not inaccurate in saying the first journal. And it is being indexed. It's already indexed in one international bibliographic database, not PubMed, but that's on the way. It's still very active today. And he did a wonderful service in establishing the institution, which you can see to the left of the slide, Kaivalya Dham, which is on the west coast of India. Now at this time, 1920s to the 1930s, people looked upon yoga as something which was a bit like a magic trick. Very exceptional yogis sitting in the foothills of the Himalayas, able to do without food and water, able to stay in an airtight pit. And so, Swami Kuvalayanada, on the right side, you can see, in Kaivalyadam, you can actually see this pit now, if you visit the institution. He actually conducted an experiment where a yogi was able to go into the pit, stayed there for some time, a lit candle went out, meaning that the oxygen was over, but the yogi carried on normally there for some more time. So there was a fascination in studying siddhis, not just Swami Kuvalayananda, but Kothari, who published this interesting study on a yogi from Mysore, who was for 8 days underground. He brought his electrical activity of his heart to nil, that's the yellow line there, and it remained at nil for 8 days. People thought he had died, but he said, on no account should you take me out of the pit. On the 8th day, his heart started beating again. This was published in American Heart Journal in 1973. When we talk of these special powers or siddhis in India, the research is incomplete if we do not give recognition to this great scientist, B.K. Anand, who actually is known for his work internationally on the hypothalamus, but fortunately for us, in his extra time, he dabbled in yoga research. He actually did this in the premier institute for healthcare in India. It caters to thousands of people every day, almost giving very high quality healthcare at a nominal cost. Also has activities, academic activities of a very high grade. The All India Institute of Medical Sciences in New Delhi, which is active in yoga research right from the time of B.K. Anand in the 1960s to the present time. So for those of you who don't know where New Delhi it's right up in the north of India. Well, the study of siddhis went on in India, but apart from this, there were certain sages in India who went to the West to be studied. One such example is Swami Rama, who is well known for his book, Living with the Himalayan Masters. And he was studied at the Meninja Foundation. This was presented yesterday by Dr. Satvir Khalsa. And it was amazing because he was able to demonstrate that he could voluntarily regulate functions thought to be involuntary. Like he could change the temperature on the left and right side of one hand by around 8 degrees Fahrenheit. Very amazing, at will. So even today, though he passed away in 1996, he has an institution named after him. There's the Himalayan Institute in Dehradun, and Swami Rama's Sadhaka Grama in Rishikesh in North India, a very beautiful institute where they're doing work on biofeedback, and I'm happy to say I'm associated with their research. The spiritual director of this is the very learned scholar, Swami Veda Bharati. It's located right up there at the foothills of the Himalayas, a very, very beautiful place. Well, another great sage came from Rishikesh and revolutionized yoga research. This was Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. What's so special about him? For the first time, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi took from the yoga texts a principle and devised a technique that is transcendental meditation, which can be practiced just for 20 minutes by an average person. You don't have to leave the world, you don't have to sit at the foothills of the Himalayas. A student can just practice this technique for 20 minutes every day for 3 weeks and show profound physiological changes. And with this, people stopped studying these exceptional yogis and looked at yoga in daily life for people like you and me. So a whole spate of research started in India, physiological effects of yoga practices, therapeutic applications, and other applications as well. When we talk about the physiological effects of yoga, I want to mention that one of the earliest studies was one which I had the good fortune to be involved in. This was at the National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences in Bangalore in South India. The photograph on the left is a little dim. It was actually taken in the 1990s, where a project called Project Consciousness was started, and my guide, the late Professor Desi Raju, is actually visible in the picture. This was a very interesting project where we wanted to study all dimensions of consciousness: sleep, hypnosis, what happens when a person takes psychedelic drugs, what happens in a comatose patient, and what happens in yoga at the other end of the scale. Well, my project, MPhil and PhD program, started with me studying comatose patients, very depressing, very sad, and I was thoroughly ready to leave the course when my guide said to me, you could take up yoga, and that's when I really got in contact with Dr. Nagarathna, Dr. Nagendra, Raghuramji, who actually came to the institute and taught yoga and who were volunteers for my PhD thesis, and that's where it's taken me on my own journey, which has been thoroughly rewarding. So I just wanted to share that with you. Well, how do we study the physiological effects of yoga practices in India? A variety of techniques. We look at the energy expenditure, autonomic variables using polygraphs, and we have records like this. We study the EEG with brain maps, evoked potentials, where a particular wave corresponds to a specific part of the brain. We do whole night studies of polysomnography, functional magnetic resonance imaging, and more recently we have a government-funded project at VYASA, which is being, I'm the PI and the co-PI, and the active person involved in it is Dr. Naveen, where we're actually doing a task when the person's brain is being imaged. Well, this is about the physiological effects. What about the results? Two main things, or three really. One is we found that irrespective of the type of meditation, we can say all of them are states of alertful rest. The second point is that whether it is pranayama or whether it is meditation, the changes appear to occur at a particular part of the brain called the thalamus. Now, what is the thalamus? The thalamus is like a gate. It allows us to filter and be selective in our attention. If we want to listen to, say, the sound of the door shutting or closing, we can be attentive to that. But if you choose to not listen to that, but to focus on the lecture, then that choice can be made in a very simplistic way at the level of the thalamus. So it's very interesting that such selective gating is activated both by pranayamas and meditation and has lots of implications for pain control. So if you've got a pain, whether to be attentive to the pain or disregard it, maybe that's where yoga can help. And finally, we've got sufficient research to say that meditation influences the quality of sleep. There's less of light sleep, more of deep sleep, fewer arousals, and probably more of rapid eye movement or dream sleep, which may or may not be a good thing. We are still looking at that. Well, there are always more questions in research, so I'm going to leave physiology there and go on to the next area, the therapeutic applications. There are lots of questions. Should one do one practice or many? Should there be disease-specific practices? How long and how regularly should one practice before one can stop practicing and still retain the benefits one has obtained? And what should a research study examine? This is actually a lot of issues there for researchers. One, these are the diseases which have been researched in India, and probably the best researched and the best proven to be managed successfully with yoga is bronchial asthma. It began with a landmark paper in the British Medical Journal in 1985 by Dr. Nagarathna and Dr. Nagendra. And I would also like to mention another person who worked in this area and brought out a very elegantly designed study. We all think that you cannot have a placebo in yoga because if a person is practicing yoga, they know that they're practicing yoga. So you can't really have, it's not like a pill. You can have a pill which has an active ingredient and an identical pill which has just got sugar or something harmless. But you can't do that with yoga. So if there's a yoga group, you cannot have a placebo group. This was shown for the first time to be not the case by a person called Virendra Singh, who did a placebo-controlled trial on yoga for bronchial asthma. He devised a particular device called the pink, which he called the Pink City Lung Exerciser, because he belonged to the Pink City of Jaipur. In this device, if one breathed through it, automatically inhalation and exhalation came in a ratio of 1:2. So he called it, he had one active device which produced this change, and a device which looked just like it but did not change the respiration. He compared the effects and found that those people who used the active device which simulated pranayama had beneficial effects, whereas those who used the passive device which did not produce any change in respiration had no change. This is a very elegant study and worth a read. Well, there are lots of references, and a lot of these randomized controlled trials have been done at the Swami Vivekananda Yoga Research Foundation, or Swami Vivekananda Yoga Anusandhan Sansthan, VYASA. I'd like to say, you've seen the pictures many times. I've selected two of them, blending the best of the East and the West. Administration carried out on the left side in a very routine way, like administration of all universities all over the world, but in a building shaped like an Om. On the right side, a state-of-the-art auditorium, rather like the one in which we are in at the moment, but in the foreground, a scene from the Bhagavad Gita. So really blending the best of the East and the West. And it's in this organization that right from 1985 till the present time, that a number of elegantly designed, rigorously controlled, randomized controlled trials have been conducted, principally by Dr. Nagarathna, Dr. Nagendra, and their team. While I was at VYASA, that's the location of Bangalore, for those of you who are not familiar, my focus was not so much on therapy, but on rehabilitation. And I've looked at a number of areas: children who are mentally challenged, children with impaired vision, adolescent girls who were put in a correctional facility for having committed an offense. I'm not going to go into details, except for the last two, a geriatric population and post-traumatic stress disorder. We did a study. This is the older people. In the upper right quadrant, you can see the old age home. And here on the left, you can see people who were actually practicing yoga. They were all above the age of 60. We had 69 randomized as 3 groups, a yoga group, an Ayurveda group, and a control group. Followed them up for 6 months. We had 26 variables, and I'm just going to give you the gist of our findings. And the publications are all mentioned here on each slide. If anyone wants any paper, I'm happy to send you the PDF. At the end of 6 months, yoga improved the quality of sleep, the mental state, the gait and balance, the memory, and the lung functions in these older people. Lots of improvements. But far more pertinent, we asked them, out of all the practices that we gave you, which did you enjoy the most? And these older people said, we enjoyed bhakti yoga, the devotional sessions, because many of them were in a rather hopeless state. They had been abandoned by their children, they had had a good life, and they were left in this old age home. And they needed something to give them a sense of hope and courage to face the future. So that was rather beautiful. And post-traumatic stress disorder was another thing which we studied. I'm going to mention 2 examples here of PTSD. One was the South Asian tsunami, which struck on Boxing Day, December 26, 2004. It affected South Asia, and there is an archipelago of islands in the Bay of Bengal. They were completely submerged with water. We went there a month later, the Andaman Islands, and the people were in a state of tremendous fear because their livelihood depended entirely on the sea, and they didn't see any future ahead of them. They said, we need the sea to live, and were frightened of the sea. We gave them a 7-day yoga intervention, and we found that at the end of it, their fear, anxiety, sleep disorders all had reduced. Quite a different study was conducted more recently by myself in Haridwar, where we looked at not a sudden calamity, but a repetitive stress disorder. In the northeastern state of Bihar, it's very sad. Whenever the monsoon comes, the people know that with almost sad regularity, they're going to face flooding. And unlike the tsunami, where the victims actually had massive help from the International Red Cross and so on, in the case of the northeastern state of Bihar, there's an apathy, not just in the authorities, but in the people themselves. They feel it's going to flood, we have to just take our possessions and run as soon as the rain starts. So instead of being hyper-aroused, which is often a symptom of post-traumatic stress disorder, the people in the northeastern states of Bihar, when we went there, were depressed. We found that yoga actually helped them. Just here, again, it was a randomized control trial, very small sample, because it's very difficult under these conditions to do a study. But we did find that a single 1-week intervention helped to reduce their sadness, and that is what we published in BMC Psychiatry in 2010. Well, I'm going to move on to a completely different area now. Occupational stress, particularly the IT industry. As you know, Bangalore is the hub for that. Very appropriate to talk about it in this city. And the people there have a whole range of problems. When we did a preliminary survey, we found that over 20% of them were so stressed with their job, they were happy with their jobs because they were well paid, but over 20% of them were taking over-the-counter, and in India, over-the-counter medication is quite easily obtained, anti-anxiety medication. Well, they also had other problems like musculoskeletal problems ranging right from wrist pain up to low back pain, and dry eye syndrome. That's not a myopia, but the absence of tear formation or poor tear formation because of gazing long at the computer screen. We found that just 2 months of yoga was able to help them, again a randomized control trial on 220 individuals drawn from software companies, both grade 1 to grade 4, randomized as 110 in each group, a yoga group and a control group. The intervention was 45 minutes, 5 days in a week. And these were the benefits. Less somatization of stress, that is, conversion of stress to bodily symptoms, better motor performance, so they were actually able to use their keyboard better, lower musculoskeletal discomfort, and decreased dry eye. Very important for the computer professionals, and I think very relevant to the people in this city. We did publish 4 papers related to this. If anyone wants any of the details, again, I'm happy to provide them. When we talk of occupational stress, it's only inevitable that I move away from VYASA to another institution in the north of India. That is the Defense Institute of Physiology and Allied Sciences, which is committed to improving the physical and mental health of the armed forces in India. Now, many of the armed forces have to go and actually stay at the northernmost border where they are faced with terrible cold and rarefied oxygen. And this DIPAS has actually adapted yoga, particularly Dr. William Selvo Murthy, and used yoga for the soldiers there very successfully to help them to acclimatize and adapt to the high altitude. So there are a variety of institutions doing yoga research in India. But there was one strange thing that I noticed when I went to yoga institutions. Many of them are filled, most of them were filled with educated Indians and people from outside India. Very few of them actually had Indian villagers. Well, all of that changed with a mass revolution. This is the organization to which I now belong. Our beloved founder, very charismatic and dynamic, Swami Ramdev, has actually taken yoga to the villages of India through his camps and through live telecasts. It's a very recent organization. Research began just in 2007, and it's located right up in the north of India. This is our outpatient building, where we recently have started a 100 inpatient block particularly to treat patients after Ayurvedic surgery for conditions like hemorrhoids or piles. But we also have another inpatient facility. This is the plaque outside it, written in Hindi, which says that it is committed to the conducting of randomized controlled trials. This is the facility, which can house anything between 150 patients during winter to 600 patients in summer. And there are individual huts where people can actually have Ayurveda treatments, naturopathy treatments, and so on. We also have the Yoga Teacher Training Center, because ours is now a state private university. And this year, we've started the PhD program. In the upper left, you can see an auditorium which can house 2,000 people. And in the lower part of the slide, there's a hall which looks rather like a hangar and an aerodrome, where 10,000 people can practice yoga at a time. Well, India has a large population, keep that in mind. So what about our research? I'm just going to talk very briefly. The first area that I'm going to cover, and I'm really coming to the end of my presentation, so if I'm running out of time, don't worry. The first area is actually looking at the techniques which Swami Ramdev has made so popular across the whole of India. What are the physiological effects of those techniques? And can we correlate them with the descriptions in the ancient texts? The technique we have particularly looked at is Kapalbhati, where exhalation is forceful. Normally, exhalation happens just like an elastic band. You stretch the elastic, you leave go, it recoils. But in Kapalbhati, you actually make exhalation an active process involving energy. You also increase the rate, and in Patanjali Yogapeeth, we recommend a rate of 45 to 60 breaths per minute. We had a number of research questions like, if Kapalabhati literally means shining forehead, does it really increase the blood flow to the brain? And if so, what happens to the blood and the oxygen at the periphery? We measured it with certain devices and found and published that there is no change in cerebral blood flow. Very good news, because if there was a boom, an increase in blood flow, it wouldn't be good for people who are at risk for stroke. But there is an increase in peripheral oxygen levels. And this, as I mentioned, is published. If it increases the blood flow to the brain, does not increase, what about certain functions like attention? Do they improve or not? So we did both paper and pencil tests. This is a test for that, as well as certain electrical response tests, and found that Kapalabhati does indeed improve the attention. And now these are the references given on the right side. So in a way, it really fulfills the description of yoga being a skill in action. There's an optimal utilization of blood. You don't need a whole increase, holographic increase in blood flow to the whole brain. Just a selective increase to those areas involved in attention is what we now believe to be happening in Kapalabhati. The other questions we've asked are, normally an increase in attention is associated with an increase in arousal. So are people more stressed when they do Kapalabhati? We studied that through the heart rate variability. A lot of people are researching the heart rate variability, so let me explain it as simplistically as possible. If you run, your heart rate should go up, and then you sit down quietly or maybe do Shavasana, the heart rate should go down. And then you need to run again, so the heart rate should go up again. Now this flexibility of the heart, being able to increase and decrease at will and on demand, is heart rate variability. The greater the health of the heart, the greater the heart rate variability. And generally, this is associated with higher parasympathetic tone. When the sympathetic tone is high, the heart rate variability is low. So what happened in Kapalabhati? There was actually no sign of sympathetic activation. And when it is practiced at a lower rate, I want to emphasize this. Earlier studies, particularly done by Dr. Dostalek in Prague, showed sympathetic activation with Kapalbhati when it was practiced at the rate of 120 breaths per minute, which makes it a Kriya. When it is practiced between 40 to 60 breaths per minute, according to the descriptions of the Bihar School of Yoga, as well as our institution, it is a pranayama, and at that rate, it does not produce sympathetic activation. What else does it do? Does it really? There are lots of people all over India who are practicing it in the hope that it will help them to lose weight. Does it really do so? And we have found that it does. It increases their energy expenditure by 41%. And possibly this has implications for weight loss. We've also looked through the years at right nostril, uni-nostril breathing, left uni-nostril breathing, alternate nostril breathing. I'm going to skip a few slides here and just talk on alternate nostril breathing, because that's what we've been doing most recently in Patanjali Yogapeeth. Our most recent publication has very clearly shown that alternate nostril breathing reduces the blood pressure. Very, very effective. I'm now thoroughly convinced about this through a series of studies done both at VYASA and now more recently at Patanjali Yogapeeth. It brings about balance, a balance between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, a balance between the left and right half of the brain. And now we move on to another area. I'm actually going to talk on 3 areas very quickly, which we have taken up in PYP or Patanjali Yogapeeth. They are related to prevention of disease. We do studies on yoga therapy, but I am particularly interested, can we prevent disease from happening? Can we keep people healthy? So one way is by looking at yoga for children. The second way is by looking at people who are in stressful occupations. And the third way, we have been doing it, is by looking at people who are obese. So let's start with our first study, yoga for children, both healthy children as well as those with a disease. So we did a randomized control trial, 100 school children, randomized into 2 groups, yoga and physical exercise. We then tested them on what? On physical, cognitive, and emotional testings. We completed the trial in 2010. We did a follow-up in 2011. And now we've submitted the manuscript for publication to Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. And what did we find? That irrespective of whether they practiced yoga or physical exercise, the benefits were almost the same, except for one aspect, that is the self-esteem. Now, self-esteem is a big question in India, particularly related to academics. Now, the blue area in the pie chart actually represents the number of children who expressed that their self-esteem was low when they didn't do well in their exams. So performing well in one's exams is a big, big issue in India. Every time after the exam results are declared, there's a high rate of suicides, which is a big problem. So when we found that yoga, 3 months of yoga practice can actually improve both general self-esteem and parental self-esteem, we were very happy indeed. We were particularly happy because the children, without any help or assistance from us, carried on practicing, and 42% of them were practicing yoga at the end of a year when we followed up in 2011. We've also been using yoga for children who have disorders like Duchenne muscular dystrophy. And now I'm moving on to another study, yoga for people who are stressed. This is in Raiwala in North India, an army base where the soldiers are stationed, and at any moment they can be deputed to zones of active combat. So it's very stressful for them, waiting, and they're told within 3 hours you have to pack your bags and move either to somewhere in India where there's a problem or to the northern border. So very, very stressful, and the people from this army base asked us if we could give them yoga, such yoga that would help them to remain alert, but at the same time allow them to relax. We found that indeed we could do that. Their attention improved, but their state anxiety reduced. I'm not going to go into the intricacies of this rather complicated graph where we had 3 groups. It was published this year in Psychological Reports. And finally, obesity. Obesity is actually a precursor for a number of diseases ranging from diabetes, hypertension, coronary heart disease, and certain cancers. So we've done 2 studies which were published in 2011, January and March, Medical Science Monitor, in our residential facility on yoga, and we've shown that it can really help in obesity, but we were not convinced, so we wanted to do a little more rigorously controlled study, particularly targeting central obesity. So there are people whose limbs are slim or not fat, but they have fat only concentrated around their middle region. And this is particularly dangerous because central obesity is the one which has been found to be associated with diseases and is also difficult to lose because it's packed right within and in between the viscera. So yoga does help in reducing it. We are carrying on with the study. We did a randomized controlled trial and completed it, comparing yoga and walking. I'm going to emphasize just one of our findings. While yoga and walking both improved weight loss as well as various other indices of obesity, there was just one thing which changed significantly in yoga, but not in walking, and that is this chemical called leptin. Leptin is actually a natural appetite suppressant. It's produced by the fat cells. So how great our body is, one may wonder, because our fat cells produce a natural appetite suppressant. When we did this randomized controlled trial on 100 obese individuals, we found that at the end of 15 days, the leptin levels increased significantly. That's the graph on the left. The red bar is the pre, the blue bar is the post in the yoga group. But in the walking group, though there was an increase in this natural body-secreting appetite suppressant, it was not statistically significant. So this is just a glimpse and an overview of the work that we have been doing at Patanjali Yogapeeth. There's a whole lot of other research. Now we're embarking on studies on Ayurveda, right from looking at the compounds themselves, animal studies, as well as randomized controlled trials. It's an exciting area. But I come to the end of my presentation with a quote. Yoga really should take us far beyond leptin, obesity, mundane things like that, beyond the physical. Yoga calms the mind, perhaps by increasing the inner resources through prayer, spiritual practices, that is the bhakti yoga, and then the body is in a state of balance or homeostasis. We have proposed this in the articles which I've cited here, and particularly it helps us to exist and coexist in harmony, irrespective of the type of belief system we have. Thank you very much.
Will be Dr. Nagarathna on yoga therapy and health. Dr. R. Nagarathna is the Chief Yoga Therapy Consultant and the Dean of the Division of Yoga and Life Sciences at VYASA. She combines her medical training along with her deep understanding of yoga in leading the health center. Dr. Nagarathna heads the therapy division for asthma, diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, cancer, and other ailments. Dr. Nagarathna serves as an advisor and guide for PhD students at VYASA. Dr. Nagarathna is known for her simplicity, compassion, and her deep passion to serve. At Prashanti, the wellness center of Vyasa, she is known as Amma or Mother due to her patient and motherly care for one and all. Dr. Nagarathna is the wife of our dear Guru, Sri N.V. Raghuram, the spiritual founder of Yoga Bharati.
We'd now like to invite Dr. Nagarathna ji to come speak to us.
Drama yesterday by our kids. I'm sure you are all inspired to offer our salutations to the grand hero. Namah Shri Yatirajaya, Namah Shri Yatirajaya, Vivekananda Suraye, Vivekananda Suraye, Satchit Sukha Swarupaya, Swamine Tapaharine, Swamine Tapaharine, Tapaharine. From Swami Vivekananda Yoga University, where children learn. These are children of Bachelor of Naturopathy Yoga, Bachelor of Naturopathy and Yogic Sciences, a medical course where they learn as a Gurukula system their wonderful contributions and enjoy their stay. These are the team of our yoga therapists who give the primary care, primary support, and they are with our participants who come in for residential program. From morning 5 o'clock till 10 o'clock, they are with the participants and they take care of our participants. The clarion call of Swami Vivekananda, who said, our dream shall be to see a global family where I'm sure all of you are dreaming this. Let us join hands together to make this dream come true. This is what we have been hearing from yesterday, from the masters who have been talking to us, both in the keynote addresses as well as in the other tracks. The entire concept of yoga, Swami Vivekananda condensed in this one sentence, which Raghuramji told yesterday, that we are all made of divinity. This was the thrilling message that he gave at the Chicago address when he sat there for 4, 5 days, 6 days of the Parliament of Religion, where every day the organizers would come and ask him, would you like to speak tonight in the evening session? He said, no, tomorrow. Some of the people were saying that maybe he has come all the way from India and he must be afraid of facing the American audience. Therefore, it may be the reason why he doesn't want to speak today. But later, when Swamiji was asked why he postponed this, he says, when I was listening to all the speakers, I was continuously searching in my mind as to how I should express this concept to the audience here. I was meditating through the program, after the program, all through the night, as to Mother Kali. How should I express this concept of the mother land of Bharat, which gave this knowledge base, which I'm not hearing in all these talks? How do I express this? That we are all made of Shuni Chaiva Shvapake cha Panditaha Samadarshinaha. How do I convey this concept that we are all made of divinity, we are all divine, we are all made of that universal pavitrata? And that meditation for 6 days was what came out as those two words, brothers and sisters of America, which made the thrill on that day, the September 11th in Chicago address. So that is the aim of yoga, is what he meant in that one single sentence, that the aim of yoga is to manifest this divinity within by controlling nature, internal and external, by karma yoga, bhakti yoga, gnana yoga, and raja yoga. And that is the major message, that we shall move towards total freedom by controlling nature, internal and external. Modern science has excelled in getting mastery over the external world, but here is you all who are the lovers of yoga, who are going to give this message to the world of internal control, internal mastery, self-regulation, self-management. And so this love, to see that we create a global family, how shall we manifest? By taking care of health of all our family members around the globe. And what are we seeing today in the health scenario? We moved a long way by mastering the external world, but what have we achieved? If plague and cholera were the major killers, it's been replaced by heart attack and cancer as major killers in the recent centuries. We did lay down a grand ideal, grand definition for health, where we said we shall define health as excellence, well-being at all these levels, including social and spiritual level, and not mere absence of disease. But what have we arrived at this? We went on announcing, we went on announcing that we shall reach health for all by 2000, health for all by 2010, health for all by 2020. But where are we? We are just going on facing challenges after challenges with more and more lifestyle diseases, and India is going to be the capital for diabetes by 2025 is the prediction that we are facing. Why? What is the problem? Many research papers are written up about what are our limitations, what are the criticisms. Modern medical services are becoming very costly, maldistribution of services, rural people have no access, attitude of medical professionals is becoming more and more self-centered, too many of specialities, the typical story of a person going with a headache to a GP and finally ending up with all the big file of investigations, MRI scans, etc., and comes back to the GP and says, hey, I have a clear chit, you have no problem in the head, you have no problem in the back, all your tests are clear, but what happened to your headache? Please come and sit with me now, I am going to talk to you. And find out, and I'll tell you now. Now you have a clear chit, what I'm going to say, you're going to listen to me. The problem is because your harmony in the family is disturbed, we shall work on that. So, too many of specialities, too many investigations, mechanization, dehumanization, and this has led us to propose these terms which have entered medical language now. Mind-body medicine, spirituality in medicine, mediators, processes that link the whole mechanisms. Complementary and alternative medicine has become popular and have become the need of the hour, and this has happened in spite of all the facilities, in spite of all the national health programs and facilities that are provided, insurance coverages, free treatments, etc. But people are paying up for their alternative medicine because of this dissatisfaction. Therefore, there have been attempts at integrations, and what are all these attempts that have been going on. There are several models of integrating modern medicine, integrating CAM systems into modern medicine, and many of these obviously have been based on the concept that we should produce enough evidence to see that it gets accepted as a scientific module, and therefore there are several integrative medicine. Probably America has the largest number of integrative medicine centers. I think Naveen has the exact number, around 60, 70 centers around this country, where many of these centers provide services already in this country to the chronic illnesses as a part of their health services in private organizations as well as in government organizations. Many research programs are going on through these integrative centers, and we have the big team here which is headed by our Dr. Sarkar, who also run an integrative center. Many research projects that are going on and many integrative activities in India where we have been collaborating for integrating it into the mainstream as a yoga program in various multi-speciality hospitals, one in Narayana Hrudayalaya, and many other hospitals, Sagar Apollo Hospital, Government Ayurvedic College, etc. As well as in modern medical major hospitals, primary health centers, we have collaborations with the services that are provided by an institution called Karuna Trust for the tribals in India and many Ayush hospitals. Karnataka government wanted to do this, and therefore they invited us to provide the details and a project to be incorporating, starting an integrative center within the Karnataka government major hospitals, and this was a first meeting that was held in June this year, and the Medical Education Ministry of Karnataka is already planning. And I should share this with you that when we just planned this in June, the first component of it, the music therapy during labor, has already been installed in the government hospital in Bangalore. So, is there enough scientific evidence to do this? Does the medical science accept this? Does the medical councils welcome this? Is a big challenge for all of us. Is the first question everybody asks would be, is there enough scientific evidence for this? Is there enough data to accept this as an evidence-based medicine? What happened? Sorry. Yes, yoga has, in fact, as early as about almost 10 years ago, Shirley and the group started Googling and collecting all the PubMed evidence for only the naturopathy publications, and we were able to compile almost 15,000 publications. And now yoga has large number of publications, almost 20,000 or so, or less, about 10,000 of them, which are all established and indexed journals. There is enough data on therapy for different diseases. There could be more. Positive health, meditation research, and physiological effects of individual diseases, and where we are happy to say that we have about 9.5% of all the published literature on yoga. There is quite a good amount of evidence on the effect of the Ayurvedic medications using placebo-controlled trials going through the 4-phase trials. There are publications in index journals, compiled MD and PhD theses from different universities in India are available, and a big repertoire of published literature is already available on acupuncture, herbal therapies, traditional Chinese medicine, massage, pranic healing, etc. So, although there is so much of information that is pouring in, if a drug which has gone through the phase 4 trials comes out with a 10% betterment in the efficacy, it will be in the market within the next 6 months. Just 10% betterment to the previous drug, it will be already in the market. But for the last 30, 40 years, as you have seen the historical review by Dr. Shirley, when there is so much evidence on the efficacy of these yoga and self-management techniques and other therapies, why is it taking so long to get into the mainstream? Why has it not yet been integrated? Is it the drug lobby? Is it a fight for survival? Can be the future? Can it be the future for health science research? Are we going to push this and see that all scientists get convinced that they should really start doing more and more research into this area and work on this? What have we been understanding for the last years of interest in this area? We all recognize that mind is the source of all these major diseases, the psychosomatic diseases or the lifestyle diseases that are all on the increase. So when mind is the major factor, when lifestyle is the major factor, we have also understood that it's all the four of these: diet, exercise, bad habits, and stress. Enough literature is available today. People are given enough education. People know what is junk food, what is good for our health, what is bad for our cholesterol, what is bad for our constipation, which can lead to many other diseases, what are the bad effects of obesity. Media is flashing it. Exercise is good for health. All parks are renovated so that people have enough facilities. Gyms are available. Fitness centers have opened up. In spite of all that, why are all these diseases on the increase? Because although I know what I should be doing, what I should not be doing, it's my mind that stops me from adhering to the lifestyle. It's my mind that gets me stuck in our stress factor. Therefore, should we really be working on the mind, only on changing the mindset of people, rather in addition to the education on the information about the lifestyle, is the major question based for which the whole of the concept base is provided by the concept that we are all not just the physical body. The whole problem is because we have not understood enough about the mind. We have not understood something beyond the molecules, beyond the chemistry, beyond looking at body as a mega machine. As early as 17th century, somebody said that your body could be a mega machine, a highly complex, and we know how to handle it. Why do we need spirituality? Why do we need anything from the church? Discard everything from spirituality in the church, and we as scientists are going to give the knowledge to the health sciences. And 17th century, we are now in 21st century, we have taken 300 years to realize that we are not just a mega machine. Body cannot be just molecules and chemicals which can be handled by electrons and protons and electronics. There is something beyond. What is that? Prana. What is that? The mind and the beyond. What is this knowledge base? Where do we get this knowledge base? Where do we go from here? Should we understand mind by approaching the psychologist? Psychology is the youngest science of 40 years. And if you are a genuine, sincere psychologist, we still say that as psychologists, we are still wanting to find the right definition of mind. And where do we go from here? And when, as psychologists, when we are the real torch bearers to handle the mind, what are we doing? We have taken the same paradigm of investigations. if I have to study the liver, I take a piece of the liver and in an animal first, then a human being, a biopsy, and study it under the microscope. Similarly, when I want to study the mind, I am taking somebody else's mind, doing experiments on human mind of somebody else. But what did our rishis say? Wow, we are human beings. We are not simple programmed animals. To be treating the mind as a programmed stuff. Can I do something more than that? I can divide my mind into two parts. One, the observer mind, and the observed mind. So why don't I do the research inside? So I take a piece of my mind to look at my mind and study my mind, observe my body, observe my breath, observe my liver, observe my bladder, observe my muscles, observe my structure, observe my prana. And this is how the entire science of Ayurveda developed, entire science of medical management developed, entire philosophy of yoga and Ayurveda developed. And therefore, it's a very, very unusual way of looking at the system, and it's very difficult for us who are trained in molecular chemistry, molecular biology, to be able to get into this mode of understanding the human system. When they talk about tridosha, even today it's very, very difficult. At what level does the dosha come? What do they mean exactly by dosha? They start with dosha at the physical level, but they take you right up to the universal consciousness. Right from the triguna, the tridosha starts. So it's a very complex phenomenon, a total shift in our understanding paradigm that we have to develop to be able to understand these concepts. And here is a concept which says that we are all made of 5 bodies. I am not going to go into details. All of you are familiar. The physical body made of chemical molecules, chemistry, the electrons, protons, neutrons, which are in a continuous flux, made of beautifully Deepak Chopra calls this as giving the body as a flow of electrons, just like a Ganga river. Beautiful example. What is our physical body? It is like a river Ganga. How old is river Ganga? River Ganga is maybe 5,000 years old. How old am I? I am 60 years old. A little more than that, of course, this body. I am just giving you an example. Is any part of you, is any molecule in you, is there any cell in you which is as old as you are? Is there any drop in the Ganga river which is as old as 5,000 years? No. Continuous renovation, continuous rejuvenation, continuous replacement, continuous flow, continuous apoptosis, continuous new cell formation, continuous revitalization of each and every molecule is going on. Then why are we afraid of atherosclerotic block which is going to be a permanent block? No, even within that block there is an eternal flow, eternal change of molecules, eternal change of calcium particles even in the calcium deposit. That is what is a living body. So this understanding that prana is required for this chemistry to flow, chemistry to run, chemistry to do its phenomena is a very, very vital definition that is required for you and me as medical professionals to be able to understand this concept of reversibility that the sages are trying to portray in this understanding of the concept that these molecules are not just fixed, non-living material which will have its chemistry permanent for the next 10,000 years. Every molecule is changing, and that change is brought about by prana. We should listen to Raghuramji about prana as a fascinating concept of what are these 5 pranas and how the to and fro motion, etc., he classifies them in a fascinating way. The prana concept, which is the vital energy, vital body with its own anatomy, with its own pathways, with its own structural passages, the nadis, etc., about which Dr. Selvan is very fascinated to start writing up a paper, the prana, which maintains the functioning of each and every cell of our body. The mind, Manomaya Kosha, with its function of perception and playing of our emotions. The Vijnanamaya Kosha, the thinking apparatus, the subtler inner eye, the knowledge base, the right and wrong knowledge, the observer inside who can see the mind which is getting lost in the emotion. I can see that I am able to perceive, I am able to think, I am able to intellectualize, I am able to play an emotion, I know that I am getting angry, I know that I am getting lost in my anger, and after I am getting lost, I am lost in that and created a problem for myself, and I realize it later, who is that I? The Vijnanamaya Kosha. And if I can stay in this Vijnanamaya Kosha and the background screen state of pure existence, bliss, consciousness, the limited, the unmanifest, quiet, alertful, restful state that Shirley was talking about, the silent, quiet, alertful, wakeful state, the Anandamaya Kosha. What we try to tell our participants is, it's in the Vijnanamaya Kosha and Anandamaya Kosha that we are always healthy. A cancer patient who is suffering and who is terminal now is having a layer within himself, the Vijnana and the Ananda, in which he is free from disease this minute. This is the understanding. And therefore the concept of reversibility. Therefore the concept that you have a layer within you, an aspect within you which you really are. You are not the cancer, you are not the body, you are not the mind, you are not the prana, but you are that inner being which is the healer within. And if you and I, as yoga teachers, can help our participants to reach that inner being, inner state, inner stability, inner state of total alertful rest under all circumstances, the healing is possible. So what is the healer within? My pure state of total blissful silent state of existence in which we start becoming stable, but we, not knowing this knowledge base, I got myself lost in my stressful responses. The imbalance which is created at the Manomaya Kosha, at the mind level, which has resulted in a long-term habituated imbalance which activated, drew up too much of our energy, and that is the cause. And therefore, what is our aim? Aim is to change our mindset. Aim is to change our lifestyle by changing our mind, getting back pratiprasava, getting back to that state of samatva. Samasthiti is the stability that all our participants who come for the yoga program are learning. In fact, I can go on and on with giving several examples. I remember one girl, one lady, IT professional, highly intellectual, in a very high level of being a vice president of a company. She was almost reaching a state of divorce after having had a life of about 14 days, in which, 14 years of her life, where she started feeling that she is not in the right direction. And therefore, her life is going haywire, she should quit and get away, but a lot of conflict, etc., she decided to come. And after just one day, she says, my problem is solved. Why? I understood that I have the inner capacity not to respond and react to this situation in the family or with the husband or with the children or the in-laws or the family situations. I can maintain my stability under all circumstances. This understanding has made all the difference, she says. In fact, within 4 days, she had a family get-together celebration in Prashanti Kutiram. So it is this knowledge base that we shall push into our therapy participant, which I'm sure many of the yoga therapists are already practicing here in this center. Therefore, as in the language of Dr. Dilip Sarkar, it is rest, it is relaxation. Yoga is calming down. And for that, all these techniques are necessary, which should help us to take us to that deep state of inner quietude, calmness through asanas, pranayama, meditation, etc. As we said, research information is available on all these diseases, which Dr. Shirley has shown, and we have been seeing graphs and curves for the last 2 days. I thought there is no point in just showing you more and more graphs. Let us move on to understand that we have now enough available information, and we at VYASA have got almost 2 to 3 publications in Index Journal in many of these diseases, and we have miraculous changes we see in our patients. Patients particularly with various head injuries. In fact, this video is not working here. A person who couldn't walk without support, within next 15 days starts running up a staircase. These are miraculous examples that we see in Prashanti Kutiram, not only in disease situations, but also we have now enough data on the physiology of yoga, positive yoga for positive health, promotion of positive health, and sorry about that spelling, yoga for rehabilitation, and yoga in acute medicine. In fact, Mohanji keeps always saying that if somebody gets an asthma attack, you just have to give them telephonic instructions, relax, 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 rest, 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 slow down, observe your breath, their attack goes away. And the fascinating data from TM group, where the TM group showed that if 1% of the population meditates, there will be reduction in the crime rate in the whole community. Fascinating data. So with that, where do we go? Emotional stability is the answer. It's not emotional sharpening that is helping us. It is the stability. And for that, we move on to reduce our speed, develop mastery over the speed that has percolated into each and every part of our body, and therefore the entire knowledge base which helps us to understand the mind, define the mind, recognize the facets of mind, and give almost a mathematical model of our mind. What is mind? Thinking. What is thinking? Thoughts. What are thoughts? Thoughts arranged in a particular sequence, in a particular order is a sentence. So we all think in sentences. So each sentence is made of individual thoughts, and a flow of sentences on the background of awakeness is the definition of mind. And mind goes through 4 facets. That is, this facet as the process of random thinking, chanchala mind. When the chanchala mind is going on, there is no connection between the thoughts. Randomly, unconnected thoughts is a random mind or a chanchala mind, which gets channelized when we train our mind from our infancy to the end of our education. What have we done? We have learned to channelize the type of thoughts on a particular track. Channelizing is concentration, ekagrata, and Swamiji said education is to develop this concentration. And all the technological advances, all the big breakthroughs, all the major advances that we have achieved over the last century are because of this training of the mind in ekagrata. The yogis went on to say that mind has 2 further facets. It's not enough if you just end up doing sharpening, focusing, channelizing the mind, and further into dharana, but it is important to move further. The 2 other facets that the sages said after concentration, which we are all familiar with, is the dharana, the single thought state. In ekagrata or concentration, we are dwelling on a single topic. When Newton had to decide decipher how an apple was falling down. He had multiple thoughts connected with the apple falling down and no other thoughts. 3 days, 3 nights he had not eaten or slept until the problem was getting solved. So why should it not fall this direction? What is it? What is this force? What is that force? What is the formula involved? All connected thoughts, ekagrata solve the problem. But here is a further step in our focusing in our ekagrata dhyana. He said, I can see the beautiful tree, I can see the bird, I can see eye of the bird, get away, you cannot hit. It was only Arjuna who said that. I can't see anything other than the center of this spot in the eye, and then he was able to succeed. That is dharana, desha bandha chittasya dharana. And that we train in Trataka practice, where we ask them to focus on the center of the lamp, the flame, and ask them to concentrate. But this is very, very strenuous, much more stressful, much more damaging than ekagrata. Therefore, we need to move on to the next step, that is dhyana, which is the relaxation and rest, manah prashamana upayaha yogaha. And in this, we defocus the mind. After we have trained the mind to come into a single thought, we have to defocus, let go, expand, come to a thoughtless state. And that is the whole process that happens when asana or pranayama or meditation or bhakti or karma yoga or gnana yoga. In all these things, what happens is first the mind gets channelized, focus, and then let go. That let go is the state where you are going to touch the inner being, the Anandamaya Kosha, the blissful layer, and that is where the whole healing can happen. And japa is the tool for reaching that state, and then one enters into the state of samadhi. So it is the samadhi that is the healer, in where the person gets absorbed in the part of the body on which we have brought the awareness and focused, did the ekagrata, and then let go in that spot. I am reminded of taking just one more minute. Last example, had a back pain patient, very rough and tough, sturdy man, a miner who was working, who would drive on jeeps in rough terrains in Rajasthan for his marble business, and he comes for a bad back pain to campus, and he learns everything very, very good and very well responded, goes back home. He used to call me now and again, because I was really worried about his back. He had a bad prolapsed disc. He improved a lot. He would call me and say, Didi, aap chinta mat karo, I am fine. I was more worried than him, because he was such a rough and tough man. Then one day he called me and said, Didi, ek kuch ho raha hai aajkal. What is it? See, you have given me a program of 1 hour in which you want me to cover about 12 practices, but nowadays I can only do 2 practices. I said, no, you can't do with 2 practices. How long is it going to take you for 2 practices? I asked him. He said, Pura ghante. 1 full hour I am doing only 2 practices. Wow! I was really surprised. I asked him, what happens? How does that happen? He says, when I stay in my position of Setubandhasana or Pavanamuktasana, I maintain in that sthiti, I maintain there, I enter into my disc area, I focus there, I concentrate there, I do intense focusing and let go from that part and stay there for a long time, and I get lost, and I don't know how long I stay there, and it takes almost 15-20 minutes in each posture, and I'm so happy in my back when I come out of that. Is it okay? Was his question. I said, that is the whole of the aim of yoga. Prayatna shaithilya ananta samapatti bhyam. Stay in that spot, let go. Do ekagrata, dharana, dhyana on that spot, and that is the healer. And then I asked him, how is your back pain? What are you doing? नहीं कल ही मैंने जीप लेके बहुत पहाड़ चढ़ के आया हूँ, कुछ नहीं हो रहा है. This is the grandeur of healing. Going into the deep, deep, deep layers of our existence and correcting the local imbalances by applying the mind to the part and going beyond and touching our inner source by seeing divinity. When I say that, a cancer patient says, what is your who healed himself, says a Tarayama from Japan, he says, my message to cancer patients is love thy cancer cells. These are some fascinating things that we should be able to put into our people and help them and move towards this deep rest to each and every cell and help them to return to their original source of total health, total blissful existence. Prasava, the disease descending down, and Pratiprasava, returning to the original source, which is the state of Anandamaya Kosha and Vijnanamaya Kosha and the healed state. And let us all join hands together to see that we see this message of love, bhakti, peace, and harmony move with social evolution to reach that state of total inner silence and join hands with love and harmony to make this message of Swamiji come true. Thank you.
And prevention of disorders in older adults. Dr. Levitsky conducts the Late Life Mood Stress Wellness Research Program at the Samuel Institute of Neuroscience and Human Behavior in UCLA. She is a recipient of many prestigious and research awards from the National Institute of Health Sciences, Research Foundation, and other sources. We would like to present her with her plaque. Is she here? I believe she has not arrived or is not here. That's fine.
Christopher Key Chappell is Doshi Professor of Indic and Comparative Theology at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles. He has published more than 15 books, including Karma and Creativity in 1986, Nonviolence to Animals, Earth and Self in Asian Traditions in 1993, Jainism and Ecology 2002, Yoga and the Luminous Patanjali's Spiritual Path to Freedom in 2008, and In Praise of Mother Earth. The Prithvi Sukta in 2012. In 2002, he established the first of several certificate programs in yoga at LMU's Center for Religion and Spirituality. In 2004, he founded the Hill Street Center for Yoga and Meditation in Santa Monica. In the fall of 2003, he assumed directorship of LMU's Master of Arts in Yoga Studies. Next person,
meditation teacher and an ordained interfaith minister. The author and co-author of 19 books, he lectures and leads workshops throughout the country. His book, American Veda, is a chronicle from Emerson and the Beatles to yoga and meditation, how Indian spirituality changed the West, and narrates the history and influence of India's spiritual teachings in America. Huffington Post named American Veda one of the top 10 books on religion for 2010, and the American Library Association's book list online gave it the same honor in 2011. It was recently given an award for special distinction by the Oberoi Foundation for Religious Studies.
Dr. Ramesh Japra. Here.
We appreciate that she's been here. Now that Raghuramji is here, on behalf of all Yoga Bharati volunteers and everyone who has attended today we'd like to present the plaque for him and all of his contributions that he's done and all of his guidance and mentorship that he's provided for many of the volunteers, many of our youth, and even myself personally.